when it comes to this weekend and the first race of the season, what is the more likely scenario? Lewis Hamilton going into the Ferrari and getting his first win with Ferrari in the first race of the season, or the Red Bull, as Max has said, we're not going to be able to compete for the win. The Red Bull being just an absolute disaster of a car. Like, what is the more likely, realistic situation?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that is tough. So we've just run a
I
piece I wrote.
don't know.
I'm going to say Lewis winning. Sorry, was it which is more realistic? Well,
Yeah, what is more
yeah,
realistic?
I would say Lewis winning over Red Bull. I don't think Red Bull have got it so wrong that they're in a complete disaster. I think they might have a difficult start, but I don't think fundamentally they've fallen that far off the front. But Lewis is actually following in some pretty famous footsteps of people that could have won their first race for Ferrari. It's actually we've just written a piece. It's on ESPN.com right now. I think it's Fangio. There's a guy called Giancarlo Baghetti who did it, who's quite forgettable driver. But then Mario Andretti did it. His first F1 win was his first race with Ferrari. Mansell did it. Raikkonen did it. Of course, Raikkonen, the last driver to win the championship, and Alonso did it. First race in, they won the title. And it does seem to be something that a lot of drivers, when they get to Ferrari, they have success very early on. Vettel won his second race in 2015, for example. So I can see that happening. And to Laurence's point, he's invigorated. He's just coming to a place where there's so much buzz around him. So I could see that happening. Red Bull being in trouble, I don't know. It felt like they were kind of coming out of that a little bit towards the end of last year.
Yeah, there was a lot in the test at the end. I think this is what kind of gave this opinion that Red Bull are struggling, that they were doing a lot of stuff which you might not expect them to do at that stage of a test, especially with a car that should be as evolved as it is this long into a regulation cycle, and clearly still struggling with it. The lap count was the lowest, I think, of any team. And so there were enough warning signs that the car is troublesome. Plus, it seems like when they were changing things on the car setup wise, they weren't always getting the answers they were expecting. And that is a tricky situation to be in. But as I said earlier, I think Max actually has the ability to drive around a lot of that. And perhaps that's why Red Bull are kind of in the position they're in, is because so often they can rely on Max to drive around it. They can put this very peaky performance on a car, and Max can just live with it right on the very edge, whereas other drivers or his teammates usually can't. So I think we could go there, and I think it's going to be very tricky for Liam, unfortunately, just because of the nature of everything going on and the stage he's at in his career and how peaky that car looks. But yeah, I could also see Max just getting there and getting a podium or even better, just because that's just what he does, and he can live with cars which aren't really behaving in the way that they should be at this stage.
You could drive a shoebox. I think I said that last week. Like,
That's right.
if the car is really that bad, we're going to see it in the other driver. We're not going to see it from Verstappen. He will still make something happen. He'll complain about it. But I've also,
Yeah.
I think, heard him complain about a car, like, again, most of the other drivers on the grid would happily jump into. I feel like we've hit on, like, what am I missing going into this weekend? What is like the one thing that we need to be looking out for besides like the obvious storylines?
I think it'd be interesting to see where Aston Martin are. It was another team that in testing were incredibly hard to read. Clearly didn't think things didn't go the way they'd planned. But where they sit in that kind of scrap, and whether, they're going to be right towards the back, which is not going to be a happy place for Fernando Alonso to be if he's finding himself getting knocked out in Q1 still. That would be interesting. And then I guess, but this isn't really just this weekend. This is a much broader topic. How does that evolve now that Newey's there, and can they get this car anywhere to being competitive this year, or is the focus completely on 26? So I think, yeah, just seeing how bad that situation is, it will be interesting at this stage. But to be honest, it'll probably go under the radar because there'll be so much focus on the front, and there's so much to talk about at the front. But I feel like we have kind of covered that fairly well so far.
Mhm. Got
Yeah,
anything?
I'd say Aston's a good call.
All right. I mean, after that, the only thing that's really left to do here is predictions. And I'm super excited that I get to be a part of this year. Although I'd be willing to guarantee I will be trash at this. Absolutely awful.
Wait until you see my predictions, Nicole. I had a pretty bad run last year.
Okay,
at
do we
one
want
point.
like how do we
So,
how do we do this? Like who wants to go first? Do we start with everyone's like third driver on the podium? Do we just do our 1, 2, 3? What do we want to do?
so we used to do 1, 2, 3, and then I decided to be dramatic one race and do 3, 2, 1, just because I think I was trying to build up to who I was winning, and then
I
we
like 3, 2, 1.
flipped it around. But I'm happy to do either. So yeah,
Fun.
I could do. I'm happy to go 3, 2, 1.
Let's go 3, 2, 1.
I'll say third Max, second Lewis, first Oscar. I don't know what happens to Lando in this scenario, but some drama at the start, gets tangled up at the beginning, has a slow start or something like that. And yeah, that to me would be like a start of old, where bit chaotic at Melbourne. There was always the races were always kind of frenetic and threw something into the mix, and often didn't replicate what was going to come for the season. So I'm not necessarily saying that's what I think the year will look like.
Mhm.
But yeah, those would be my three.
You said Oscar winning, Lando.
Oscar winning, Lewis second, Max third.
Lewis. Okay,
Yeah,
there's second.
yeah,
Because clearly I'm writing this down because I'm
yeah. Oh no, we need a
heat to the fire.
solid log of evidence this year.
All right, Laz, what do you got?
Okay, I'm going to say Lewis Hamilton gets a podium, finishes third on his Ferrari debut, and it's a McLaren 1-2. Now, I know I said earlier that Lando qualifies on pole, Oscar wins the race, but I'm actually going to switch that around just to have a different answer to Nate and say Oscar Piastri second, Lando Norris wins. I know I've contradicted myself within one podcast, but I do that all the time, so nothing new.
Well, see, I thought the opposite to you. I was like, I've backed myself into a corner now with that earlier prediction, so I had to go with Piastri.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with what I had earlier. I'm gonna say that Leclerc still is on pole, but he does not win the race. I think he's on the podium though. So Leclerc third. Piastri, don't know what's gonna happen to him in qualifying, but he's gonna have to do a little bit of fighting and he's gonna end up in second. And I'm gonna be consistent. And I'm gonna stick with my theme. Lando wins the race. So 1 Lando, 2 Piastri, 3 Leclerc.
So we're all in on McLaren winning this weekend.
We are.
I think it's where the smart money is. If you look at testing,
Yeah,
if you look
it
at
is.
all the build up to this race, if you look at what happened last year, it's where the smart money is. But again, just to keep going on about it, but the great thing about the season is that you can say that and still have zero confidence, even though all the signs are pointing in that direction.
Yeah.
I'm also really happy to be completely wrong and root for utter chaos.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with that
same.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, thinking about this today, we love narratives in the media, don't we? There is a great reason to get excited by so many different drivers winning. I think that's always the case to a degree, but this year there's just so many different ways. Like Lewis is beating Charles, or Charles is beating Lewis, or Piastri's completely flipping the script around in McLaren. Lando's living up to his billing. Max is doing Max things and just winning out of nowhere. Lawson wins the race. It's like, wow, this guy's pretty good. Antonelli wins the race. So there's like, whichever way you look at it, it's just like, yeah, there's like just great scenarios all over the place. And I just hope that we get that, and not a situation where we get to Sunday and it's like, oh, actually McLaren are a bit further ahead than we all thought, and then it's a little bit of an underwhelming flat feeling, because that, given all the hype of the year, like coming into the season, that would be pretty painful one to digest, I think.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.